If you ever want to know a person's real character, strip away the things they think matter most, their money, their image, their pride, and watch how they treat someone they believe is beneath them. That's exactly what I did. I walked into the most expensive restaurant in Ridgewater Heights dressed like a woman who could barely afford a bus ticket. I wore a faded dress, $12 shoes, and carried a tote bag with a broken zipper. The hostess hesitated when she saw me. My daughter-in-law's parents stared at me like I was a stain on white marble. My own son looked embarrassed to introduce me. But what none of them knew was this. I earn $47,000 a month. I oversee operations across 5 countries. I am one of the highest-ranking executives at Red Crest International. And that night, I decided to reveal exactly who I was, but only after they showed me exactly who they were. What happened at that dinner shattered my daughter-in-law's family, and they deserved every second of it. But to understand how we got there, you need to know the truth from the beginning. My name is Lucinda Hale, and this is the night I stopped hiding. Chapter 1. A phone call I never expected. It was Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. I had just finished leading a meeting with my directors discussing a cross-continent expansion plan worth nearly $30 million. My office overlooked the harbor, ships docking, cranes moving, the city alive beneath me. That's when my cell phone buzzed. Aaron, my only son. I smiled reflexively when I saw his name, but the moment I picked up, I sensed something wrong. "Mom," he said, his voice tight, "are you free on Saturday?" "Depends," I replied. "What's happening? Are you okay?" No, I'm fine. It's just," he hesitated, something he rarely does. "Neela's parents are flying in from Barcelona," he finally said. "They want to meet you. We're having dinner at the Sapphire Elm." My eyebrows rose. The Sapphire Elm was not a restaurant. It was a statement. It was the kind of place where the plates looked like artwork, where the bill could cause heart palpitations, and where the valet judged your worth by the make of your car. "I see," I said. "Fancy?" "That's the thing." He cleared his throat nervously. "So I may have told them that you live a very simple life." I went silent. "And that you work a basic office job," he added quickly. "You know, like filing, typing, reception." I closed my eyes. My air conditioner hummed softly, but suddenly the room felt warm. "And why?" I asked slowly. He exhaled sharply. "Because they're intense. They judge everything, and I didn't want them looking down on you." "So instead," I said, "you preemptively let them?" "Mom, no," he insisted. "I didn't mean it that way. I just didn't want them expecting something you don't like being." "Something I don't like being." Interesting phrasing. "And you want me to act simple?" I asked carefully. He didn't answer for a long time. Then, in the smallest voice, "Please?" My chest tightened. Not because he insulted me, because my son thought I needed protecting from them. And that said everything. "All right," I said softly. "I'll be there." "You're the best," he breathed out in relief. He had no idea what storm was about to hit his perfect dinner. Chapter 2. The Decision. When the call ended, I remained seated in my office chair with the city stretching out beneath me. I wasn't angry, not exactly, but there was a bruise inside my heart I couldn't deny. He didn't know who I was. Not really. That was my choice. I raised him without wealth on display. No luxury cars, no extravagant vacations, no designer childhood. I wanted him to learn effort, not entitlement. But now, I needed to know something. How would Mila's family treat a woman they believed had nothing? My instincts whispered the answer. They'd treat me like furniture. I'd met their type before. Years in corporate boardrooms had taught me everything about people who worship money more than values. And I wanted to test them, not to trap them, but to see them clearly. So I made my decision. On Saturday, I would walk into that glittering restaurant looking like a woman who barely earned minimum wage. Not because I enjoyed deception, but because truth reveals itself only when ego feels safe. Chapter 3, Saturday night. At exactly 6 p.m., I stood in front of my bedroom mirror. I had deliberately pulled out a faded blue dress with small lint balls, shoes with bending soles, a fraying cardigan, no makeup, no jewelry, no watch, not even perfume. I tied my hair into a messy bun that made me look older than my 58 years. I chose the cheapest tote bag I owned, the one I used for groceries. I looked like a woman who worked overtime to pay rent. Perfect. I grabbed a taxi, not my real car parked in the private garage downstairs. The driver looked at me through the rearview mirror. "Special night?" he asked kindly. "Something like that," I replied. Chapter 4, The Arrival. The sapphire elm glowed like polished gemstones. Tall glass windows, a valet wearing white gloves, couples stepping out of imported cars, soft live harp music near the entrance. I stepped out of the taxi and felt the immediate shift. People stared, not maliciously, but with that silent judgment reserved for those who don't belong. I walked through the revolving doors. The hostess smiled automatically, then hesitated when her eyes landed on my shoes. "Reservation?" she asked with a strained politeness. "Hail," I replied. Her expression changed. "Oh, they're already seated. Please follow me." Her tone had upgraded by exactly 20%. I followed, and there they were. Claudia Torres. Elegant, polished, draped in a silver dress that probably cost more than 6 months of rent. Her blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon, her lips painted in a deep plum shade. Roberto Torres, square jaw, expensive watch, shoes shiny enough to reflect your future. A man who looked like he owned buildings instead of working inside them. Mila, my daughter-in-law, sweet girl, always polite, but tense tonight. And my son Aaron in a crisp suit, fidgeting anxiously. The instant they saw me, I felt it. The micro-expressions. Claudia's faint disappointment. Roberto's eyebrow twitch. Mila's embarrassed look at her napkin. Aaron's tight-lipped smile. "Mom," Aaron said, rushing to stand, "you made it." "Of course," I said warmly. Claudia extended her hand like one grants to a charitable organization. "Lucinda," she said sweetly, "lovely to meet you. Finally." Her tone was sugar. Her eyes were ice. Roberto gave me a stiff nod. "A pleasure," he said. Mila kissed my cheek in a quick, awkward motion. "You look good." Lie. I smiled anyway. Menus arrived, heavy, leather-bound tomes with gold embossing. I pretended to struggle. Is this French?" I asked, shrinking into my seat. Claudia smiled gleefully, the way a cat smiles at a cornered mouse. "Would you like help, dear?" she asked, voice dripping condescension. "Oh, yes, please," I replied meekly. "I'll order for her," Claudia told the waiter. "She'll have the potage du jardin. It's gentle, affordable." She emphasized the last word. Aaron pinched the bridge of his nose. Roberto ordered the most expensive steak on the menu. Mila ordered a truffle pasta. Aaron ordered something safe. I sat quietly. I didn't need a menu. I could recite it from memory. I had been here many times with international partners. But tonight, I played the role perfectly. The invisible woman. The food arrived, and so did the bragging. Claudia started with, Our villa in Barcelona just got renovated. The marble alone cost 20,000 euros. Roberto added, our vineyard investment already doubled. We're thinking of buying another estate in Valencia. Then the achievements. Mila's education, their global travels, their luxury experiences, their business ventures. Aaron tried changing topics, but Claudia steered every conversation back to, we have more. We spend more. We are more. Finally, Claudia turned the spotlight on me. So, Lucinda, she asked, oh so innocently, what exactly do you do? For work, I mean. I fiddled with my spoon, lowering my gaze. Oh, nothing impressive, I said quietly. Just office tasks, filing, basic things. Roberto smirked. Claudia nodded in fake sympathy. Well, she said kindly, every job has value, even the small ones. Small ones. I felt Mila stiffen beside her. Aaron looked like he wanted to disappear. But I remained still, serene, watching their masks reveal their real selves. When dessert arrived, Claudia cleared her throat dramatically. Lucinda, she began, we wanted to talk to you about something delicate. I waited. You're alone. You live modestly. Your salary must be very little. I kept my expression empty. So, she continued, smiling, we want to offer you a monthly allowance. A what? $600, she explained, enough to help you live decently. And in return, we'd appreciate if you gave Aaron and Mila more space. You know, not rely on them, not interfere. Interfere. The word tasted sour in the air. Aaron's fists tightened. Mila's eyes filled with shame. Roberto added confidently, it's for everyone's benefit. I looked at them, letting the silence stretch. Then I asked softly, and how did you calculate that my presence is worth exactly $600? Claudia opened her mouth, closed it, and for the first time all night, she had no script. Claudia Torres stared at me across the table, waiting, perhaps even hoping for gratitude. But gratitude was the last thing she deserved. My question hung in the air like a weight. How exactly did you calculate that my presence is worth $600 a month? Roberto blinked rapidly, as if confused that I dared challenge the generosity of the great Torres family. Claudia cleared her throat, smoothing her napkin as though she needed a physical object to regain control. Well, it's not a calculation, she said, her voice uncertain for the first time that evening. It's symbolic, a gesture, just enough to keep you comfortable, at your level. My level? It was fascinating how people revealed their truth with small slips. Aaron pinched the bridge of his nose. Mila looked down, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Before anyone else could breathe, Roberto leaned in with the subtle arrogance of a man who'd never been challenged. It's not about value, he said. It's about practicality. We simply want Mila and Aaron to start their lives without distractions. I rolled my fingertips lightly over the table. A distraction, I murmured. Is that what you think I am? Claudia inhaled sharply. I didn't say that. You didn't need to, I replied quietly. There was a silence so sharp it almost hummed. Claudia lifted her chin, grasping for higher ground. Lucinda, dear, we're trying to help you. You're alone, your income is limited, your lifestyle, well, let's say it could be easier. My lifestyle? The irony made me want to laugh. They saw worn shoes and assumed poverty. They saw a canvas tote and assumed struggle. They saw silence and mistook it for inferiority. People like them always make the same mistake. They confuse simplicity for weakness. How generous, I said softly. Roberto's chest expanded proudly. We've always felt, he gestured vaguely, that families should support one another. How touching, I replied. Aaron opened his mouth. "Mm, Let me finish," I said gently, without taking my eyes off his in-laws. Claudia clasped her hands. Lucinda, think about it. $600 every month. You won't have to worry about little expenses, and in exchange, you'll give the children freedom to grow without feeling responsible for you. I tilted my head. Are you afraid I'll be a burden? Roberto gave a sympathetic shrug. Well, isn't every parent eventually? Aaron stiffened. Dad, Mila whispered sharply. Claudia waved her off. We're only being realistic, sweetheart, she said, as if the word sweetheart softened the blow. I let them talk, because the more they talked, the more they revealed. And there, in that expensive restaurant with golden lighting and polished floors, I saw them clearly. People who built their identity on money because they had nothing else to stand on. People who believed generosity was a performance. People who believed empathy was optional. People who saw worth as a currency, not a characteristic. People who thought they were above me. They weren't, not even close. Aaron's finally exploded, not loudly, but with trembling restraint. Mom, I'm so sorry, he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't think they would. Stop, I said softly. You didn't do this. He shook his head. No, but I allowed this dinner to happen. I let them think. It doesn't matter what they think, I said calmly. It matters what you know. But he still looked devastated. And that hurt me more than anything they'd said all evening. He believed their words had wounded me. They hadn't. Their words revealed them, not me. The waiter returned with fresh water. No one touched their glasses. Claudia straightened her spine, regaining her brittle courage. Lucinda, she said with rehearsed patience, you have to understand. We come from a world where responsibility matters. We believe in taking care of our own, but we also believe in boundaries. Boundaries, I repeated quietly, such as... She offered a sympathetic smile that tightened her face like a mask. Such as ensuring you don't rely on Aaron emotionally or financially. They need space, independence, privacy. Roberto nodded approvingly. It's nothing personal. It's simply how we protect our daughter. I see, I said. You do? Claudia asked, relieved. Yes, I nodded. I see everything clearly now. The relief melted from her expression. Something about how I said it made her nervous. Good. The ground beneath their feet was about to shift. Before speaking further, I glanced at Aaron. He looked more lost than I had ever seen him. And that triggered a memory. A memory of him at 6 years old, standing outside our tiny apartment, clutching a backpack 2 sizes too big for him. He had asked, Mom, why don't I have things like the other kids? And I had knelt, cupped his little face, and said, because those things don't make people good, Aaron. What you carry inside does. That moment shaped his life and mine. And now, faced with the Torres family, I saw the contrast. My son had grown up with compassion. Their daughter had grown up with comparison. Claudia, eager to reassert control, leaned forward. I hope you're not offended, she said. I'm not, I replied flatly. She blinked. Offended, she could handle. Indifferent? That shook her. Well, good, she said stiffly. Then we're on the same page. Oh, we're not on the same page, I corrected politely. She froze. What do you mean? I interlaced my fingers calmly.
I mean that now I'd like to ask you a question. Roberto tensed, not used to being addressed directly by someone he considered insignificant. Claudia forced a tight smile. Of course, go ahead. I held her gaze, my voice soft but razor sharp. How much is your daughter worth? The color drained from Claudia's face. Roberto's fork clattered. Mila's head jerked up, eyes wide. Aaron whispered, "Mom," but I gently lifted a hand, signaling him to trust me. Claudia stammered, I don't understand. You calculated my worth to your family at $600 a month, I said, my tone polite. So I'm wondering, how much is Mila worth to you? That's different, she sputtered. How? I asked without blinking. Claudia swallowed hard. Because she's our daughter, and I'm Aaron's mother. The simplicity of it hit the air like a hammer. Roberto looked annoyed, but also unsettled. He didn't like losing control of a conversation. Lucinda, he said with forced patience, let's not twist things. I'm not twisting anything, I said. I'm simply measuring using your method. Mila covered her mouth, eyes flushed with tears. She understood me in a way her parents didn't. I'm asking, I continued softly, how one decides the price of human presence, because if $600 buys distance from me, what does it cost for your daughter to stay? Claudia's lips trembled. That's not. We didn't mean. You're interpreting this. Exactly as you said it, I finished calmly. The restaurant around us hummed quietly. People dined, glasses clinked, but at our table, time tightened into a single stretched moment. They weren't used to being challenged by someone they thought beneath them, and it showed.
Mila finally spoke, a small, trembling voice breaking the tension. Mom, Dad, this isn't right. Roberto flinched. What do you mean? He snapped. She wiped her tears. You humiliated her. Claudia looked betrayed. We were offering help. No, Mila said quietly. You were offering control. Her parents recoiled. Aaron took her hand with a gentleness I hadn't seen in years. Their love was real, but their families? That was the battlefield. Claudia stared at me, anger rising to hide her fear. You're twisting my intentions, Lucinda. I don't appreciate that. And I don't appreciate being bought like a used appliance, I replied. Her jaw clenched. This woman was not accustomed to defeat. And now she tasted it for the first time. Roberto tried to regain control. Look, he said sternly, we came with good intentions. You may not be wealthy, but you seem proud. Fine, keep your pride. We simply want what's best for our daughter. And I want what's best for my son, I replied evenly. So do we, Claudia insisted. Then why, I asked, did you assume my presence was harmful? The table went silent. Claudia fidgeted. Roberto looked defensive. Mila looked devastated. Aaron looked angry. I remained calm, because calmness is power, not volume. I placed my hands gently on the table, leaning forward slightly. You know what's interesting? I said softly. If you had treated me with even an ounce of kindness tonight, I would have never revealed anything. Claudia blinked. What do you mean? I smiled quietly. You assumed I have nothing, I said, but you never asked. Roberto frowned. You said you worked a basic job. No, I corrected. I said I did office tasks. And that's not the same? Claudia challenged. I held her gaze unflinching. No, it's not. Her lips parted. Confusion, insecurity, fear. The first drops of truth before the storm. Then what do you do? She asked, her voice small. I didn't answer yet. I let the anticipation stretch, let the air thicken.
Let them feel the weight of their mistakes. Because the moment I answered would change everything. Aaron leaned forward. Mom, what are you doing? I'm showing them who they're dealing with, I said gently. Claudia swallowed. Lucinda, what exactly is your job? I lifted my water glass and took a slow sip. The tension wrapped around the table like fog. Then I lowered the glass and spoke clearly. I am the Director of International Strategic Operations for Red Crest International. Roberto went still. Claudia's pupils dilated. Mila let out a small gasp. Aaron stared at me like he'd never seen me before. I continued softly. I oversee operations across 5 countries. I approve budgets larger than some corporations. I manage thousands of employees. And I earn $47,000 a month. Silence collapsed over the table. It was as if the restaurant dimmed. Claudia's expression twisted, confusion, disbelief, horror, shame. You're lying, finally choked. I reached into my tote bag. Their eyes followed, expecting a crumpled receipt or maybe my bus pass. Instead, I pulled out a card. A glossy, transparent metal elite card, only issued to a fraction of top global executives. I placed it silently in front of them. Claudia's hand trembled. Roberto blinked like he'd have been slapped. Aaron whispered, Mom, I had no idea. Mila began to cry again, this time not from shame, but from awakening. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. It was the silence of mirrors finally being held in front of people who had never looked at themselves honestly. Claudia finally whispered, Why? Why do you live like that? Why dress so modestly? I smiled gently. Because money was never meant to be worn. It was meant to be used wisely. She swallowed hard. Her pride dissolved. Roberto leaned back, stunned. Aaron stared at me with new respect, new understanding. And Mila, sweet Mila, touched my hand gently. Thank you, she whispered, for showing the difference between having money and having class. I squeezed her fingers. We had reached the turning point. The storm, the confrontation, the reveal, they were all building to the moment that would come next. But that moment, the one that would shatter their dignity completely? The table felt like an arena. Claudia's hand hovered over the elite card on the polished wood as if it might burn. Roberto's jaw was a tight wire. The rest of the restaurant was a dull hum at the edges of my hearing, soft laughter, the scrape of cutlery, while at our small corner the air had gone electric. No one moved. I had expected shock, yes, but I hadn't expected the particular silence of people whose entire identity is suddenly questioned. They were scrambling internally, looking for an explanation, a justification, a way to reshape the evening so the uncomfortable truth could be shoved under velvet and forgotten. There wasn't one. Claudia blinked, then fumbled out the first defense she could find. You planned this, she accused, voice wavering between fury and disbelief. You came here to entrap us. I let out a small, amused sound. Entrap? I came here to learn, to observe, and you obliged me by being your usual revealing selves. Roberto's color rose. This is ridiculous. We are respectable people. We give to our community. We support causes. How dare you? How dare I echoed softly. How dare you assume that my shoes tell you the story of my bank account? How dare you measure human worth in monthly checks and balconies? How dare you, in the name of help, call my presence a burden? Mila's hands found Aaron's under the table. He squeezed hers back like a man anchoring himself to something steady. Claudia made an awkward laugh and said, We were trying to be practical. We didn't want them to be burdened emotionally or financially. Practical, I said. Is telling someone you'll pay them to disappear practical? Is offering money in exchange for silence the same as respect? It's not help, it's buyout theater. Her face shifted, the mask of composure cracked. You don't understand where we come from. We worked very hard to build what we have. We want our daughter to be safe. That I understand, I answered. But safety built on humiliation is no safety at all. And if the price of your sense of security is the small deaths of other people's dignity, then you have created a very small world. The waiter hovered near the table, uncertain, watching the ripples of the argument. Behind him, diners began to lean into their dinners, curiosity replacing conversation. A few subtle glances toward our table multiplied until our private storm was shared property and the Torreses' advantage dwindled under public attention. Roberto slammed his hand a little too hard on the table. The crystal clinked and a hush narrowed further around us. Enough. You have no right to belittle us like this. I'm not belittling you, I said evenly. I'm pointing out what your behavior made visible. He looked away, a traitor to his composure. His face had that flushed, embarrassed hue men get when the currency they flaunt fails to buy them dignity. He reached for his phone, fingers trembling. The card in his wallet reflected a sliver of light. Let's just, Aaron began, but his voice was small. He could not moderate the avalanche once it had been loosed. Claudia moved to pick up my tote, perhaps to return my card to me, perhaps to remove the symbol of her own humiliation. Her fingers brushed the elite card, and for a dizzy second she looked like she might hand it to the waiter and vanish into an apology. Then pride, the old armor, made her withdraw. I won't accept your theatrics, she murmured. We will pay for our dinner. Roberto scoffed and pushed his wallet toward the waiter. Check, we'll pay. The waiter accepted the card politely and stepped away. For a second, nothing happened. The machines hum, people pretended not to watch. And then the voice came. Sir, I'm sorry, but this card is being declined. It landed soft and stark like a verdict. Roberto froze. What? I can try the terminal again, the waiter said, with that practiced apologetic expression restaurants train their staff to use when trouble with money appears at a table. He stepped away, fingers moving over a machine, the kind of device that is ordinarily invisible and now held the power of a new, humiliating truth. I watched their faces change from anger to disbelief to a thin, exposed panic. It was strangely poetic. The very thing they believed would protect them, their cards, their plastic shields, failed. Roberto handed the waiter a second card, declined. A third, declined. He scrolled through his phone, calling the bank, voice clipped and frightened. Claudia's glossy makeup smeared beneath her eyes. For the first time all evening, she did not attempt a performance. She looked human and frightened. She looked like someone who had discovered that the outline they had used to define themselves could be erased with the press of a terminal. Aaron put a hand to his forehead. Mila's body stiffened like a leaf in a sudden wind. I felt no joy in their suffering. Humiliation is never beautiful. I felt only a deep, quiet confirmation. The people who had tried to buy my silence were suddenly exposed without their safety net. The waiter returned, expression apologetic, but the news clinical. Sir, the third card was also declined. I'm very sorry. Roberto's face collapsed. He looked as if he had been punched. This must be a mistake. It's a bank error. It will be fixed. It's happening to us now, Claudia whispered, cheeks wet. This has never happened, not in a lifetime. Who do you think? Her voice trailed. There was nowhere to go. I took in a shallow breath, then reached into my tote bag like a calm, predictable move. People watched me, waiting for a spectacle. I plucked the metal elite card and set it on the table with deliberate care. The waiter approached and took it reverently. He swiped it. For a heartbeat that felt like the slow turn of a planet, we held our breath. Approved, he said softly, handing the card back like a relic. It wasn't a power play. It was a simple, tasteful answer, an act of responsibility. I had the means, and I chose to settle dinner. The point was not to humiliate further, but to punctuate the evening. They had chosen to treat me as small. I had chosen to reveal them by existing exactly as I was. Roberto's face was paper white. Claudia reached out and touched the elite card as if she could feel its truth. Her hand shook. The sound of their humiliation slotted into the quiet like a missing piece in a puzzle of justice. "Why are you doing this?" Roberto asked, as if the world had become unfair. "What?" Claudia whispered hoarsely. "That money can be used to crush people?" "No," I said, "that money only reflects what you prioritize. It doesn't build character, it reveals it." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out that could make sense of the evening. Then she mumbled, "You tricked us."
No trick, I replied. You fooled yourselves. Aaron reached out and laid his hand over mine, and I felt the tremor in him still. Mom, please, he said, voice low. Enough. I looked at him full and steady. His face, wet with what might have been tears, held a kind of manhood that felt earned. He had been forced to reconcile the woman who raised him and the in-laws he had chosen. It hurt him in a way I had always suspected might happen. He squeezed my fingers. We're leaving, Mila said quietly, standing with dignity. Her chair scraped softly backward, and she walked toward the station, not toward her parents. Aaron followed her, then turned and looked at me, eyes asking permission and offering apology. He mouthed something that I could not hear. I rose and took my tote. No one is banned from you, I said softly to her parents. But if you ever again try to measure a person by their shoes or the zip of their bag, don't be surprised if the scales are tipped. I kissed Aaron on the cheek. He hugged me like a man clinging to the memory of his mother's every lesson. Mila clung to Aaron, then came and lightly touched my hand, her way of saying thank you and sorry and everything in between. As we moved toward the exit, the restaurant staff gave us discreet bows. Respectful, not because of my money, but because I'd handled myself with the kind of dignity that slows traffic in a small way. Outside, the night air felt thin and clear and restorative. The valet had already retrieved Aaron's car. He offered it to me automatically, as if to shield me from further exposure. I declined. We'd taken a taxi here and would take one home. The irony of such a choice made Aaron laugh, a small, brittle sound. He was chastened, but still my son. He slid into the car as if entering a new chapter. I signaled the taxi, and as it pulled up, I saw Claudette, a longtime neighbor of mine, standing across the sidewalk, feeding pigeons, oblivious to high society conventions. She gave a small, cheerful wave. It felt like the world had slipped back into place. Aaron opened the taxi door for me, and we got in. He exhaled loudly, and then, between the click of the seatbelt and the gentle hum of the engine, he said, "Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted you to build yourself," I answered simply. "To be yours, not my shadow." "You could have told me," he said again, quieter this time, less anger now, more the confusion of a child who has woken to a different sky. "You would have still been you," I replied. "Maybe softer, maybe not as hungry, but you would be, and that matters." He let the words settle, eyes fixed somewhere outside the window at a street lamp's golden pool of light. "I'm proud of you," he finally said, "and I'm sorry." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. "You wanted to protect me. That's love. It's also the very thing that made you almost complicit in convincing them of what they wanted to believe. You acted from fear, not malice." He exhaled, a long, sad sound. "I hate that they made me feel ashamed." "You were not ashamed," I told him. "You were hoodwinked by a story they sold, one you initially believed. That happens. The difference is what you do after you see the truth." We rode in silence for a while, the city lights sliding by like quiet stars. A small radio station hummed a late-night song that had been playing on my mind for years. It felt soothing, like a balm. At my door, Aaron turned to me.
Will this change things? He asked, voice small. It will change the way they think about us, I said. Not necessarily the way they behave, but the stories they tell themselves will be thinner. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. He nodded. Do you forgive them? He asked at last. I looked at him. Mercy is not an event, it is a process. I forgive them when they learn, I said. In the meantime, I'll limit their access to our life, where absence can teach better than presence. He smiled ruefully. That sounds like your kind of lesson. As the taxi pulled away into the night, the city swallowing the distance between a restaurant of gilded plates and my modest door, I felt an odd mixture: exhaustion, sadness, the quiet thrill of a truth spoken. The night had cost nothing for me and everything for them. Their pretense, their unchallenged superiority. Back inside my apartment, I slipped off my shoes and sat for a while in the dim living room. The kettle clicked on, and as steam rose, my phone buzzed. A message from Mila. Can we talk? I want to learn. I'm sorry. I read it twice, then smiled sadly. Some apologies are the beginning of growth. Some are just the sound of a person finding their voice. Either way, it was a crack that might become a doorway. I brewed tea and looked out the small window at the soft city lights. In the reflection, my face looked older, lined sharper. But something in my chest felt lighter, as if the truth I had been holding like a private talisman had finally been set on the table where everyone could see it. Not to brag, not to humiliate, but to teach. The storm had passed. The wet earth smelt different. There would be more conversations, angry calls, and perhaps frozen invitations. There would be speeches made to other relatives and maybe even attempts to buy approval elsewhere. But those were not my battles. My victory was quieter. A son who looked at me differently, a daughter-in-law beginning to see, and a family that could not easily pretend again. And that, in the small hours when the city is honest, is enough to sleep well.
A week passed after the dinner. The city resketched its patterns. The harbor still smelled of diesel and salt, the tram bells still cut through the morning, and my mailbox still held the same kinds of envelopes: bills, a charity request, a glossy catalog I never ordered. Everything outwardly ordinary, but inside, more things had changed than anyone could have guessed. Mila called 3 days later. The first calls were brief, apologies broken and interrupted. She texted, then she sent a long message that could have been a short novel. It was raw and honest and full of questions. Finally, she asked if she could come over. 3 days after that, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to see Mila standing on my small landing in plain jeans, a sweater with no makeup on her face, hair tied back in a practical knot. It was an unadorned sight and infinitely more beautiful than the woman who had sat stiff at the restaurant. "Lucinda?" she said, voice small. "Come in," I replied, and this time the warmth in my voice was real, uncalibrated. She entered and looked around, my modest living room, the mismatched chairs, the small bookshelf of hardcover trade manuals and old novels, a framed black and white photograph of a younger me and a baby with a mop of hair, Aaron at 3, sticky-faced and smiling. "It's simple," she said, smiling uncertainly. "It's mine," I said. She sat, hands in her lap, and for a few heartbeats we just watched one another, two women on either side of 1,000 decisions. "I don't know where to start," she said finally. "I wanted to apologize, of course, but I also wanted to understand. I kept thinking about the way my parents talked, how they measure everything in numbers, and I realized I learned a lot of it from them, even when I didn't mean to." "You grew up in a different world," I said gently. "Trauma makes people cling to security. Your parents' fear of having nothing is real and understandable, but fear can become a prison if you never question it." She nodded. Her eyes were moist. "I don't want to be trapped. I don't want to raise children who think people are wallets. I'm ashamed I didn't speak up more that night."
You were caught, I said. Most people act out of scripts. The question is whether you keep the script or write a new one. She inhaled deeply. I want to write a new one, but I don't know how. You start small, I said. You practice refusing performances. You ask yourself why you buy things. You watch how you react when other people aren't impressive by society standards. And you hold yourself accountable. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it happens if you persist. She laughed, a small shaky sound that was half nervous and half relieved. That sounds easier said than done. It is, I said honestly, but it's also the only path that leads to peace. We talked for hours. She told me about childhood nights spent worrying about food, nights when a parent promised a better life and then lived to buy that promise at any cost. She told me about the guilt she had when she first saw how her parents behaved, how she wanted to defend them, yet saw the cruelty in their words. Why did you do what you did? She asked at one point, pouring words like a child asking to be read to. To protect myself and to know the truth, I answered, and to give you a chance to choose, either to repeat their patterns or to be different. She sobbed then, not dramatic, not performative, but the kind of sob that cleanses. I offered her a cup of tea and a tissue, the small gestures that in my world meant a great deal. When she left, she hugged me with an embrace that was not stiff with etiquette, but warm, human, and real. I will try, she whispered. I mean it. The days that followed were not tidy. There were angry messages from Claudia and Roberto, letters with clipped phrases about pride and respect, thinly veiled threats about inheritances and alliances. Roberto's emails were terse and businesslike. Claudia's calls were filled with clipped indignation. Aaron responded to both with calm firmness. He and Mila wrote a joint message. They wanted boundaries. They would not accept control disguised as support. If Claudia's and Roberto's could not respect that, the couple would maintain a distance. They were clear, resolute, and surprisingly brave. Some family members on the Torres side tried to mediate. A cousin called with soothing words. An aunt texted an invitation to a brunch as if to wipe the slate clean. But invitations cannot erase memory. On weekends, Aaron and Mila visited me. They came for coffee, sometimes lunch, sometimes late-night conversations about small and large things. We spoke about money in different ways, not the numbers, but how money should function, as a tool, a safety net, not as the operator of a human soul. In private, Aaron apologized again and again, but the apologies had a new tone, less guilt, more resolve. I could see his growth as if it were a physical thing. You know, he said to me one afternoon, sitting at my modest kitchen table, fingers wrapped around a chipped mug, I was afraid of what my parents would think. I thought if I let them control the narrative, they'd be more comfortable. But now I realized comfort is not the same as truth. You did what most children do, I replied. You tried to hold families together. That's honorable. But you can't hold people in a shape they're not willing to assume. He laughed softly. You make it sound like an instruction manual. Sometimes life is just a manual written in trial and error, I said. But the important part is to keep editing it.
Weeks passed. The initial shock faded from the Taurus's public face. There were no social media blasts. Their pride wouldn't parade in the streets. But behind closed doors, the cracks had opened. Claudia called one day, this time not with fury, but with a different tone. Her voice was raw and small. Lucinda, can we talk? I thought of two things. First, that people rarely change their posture unless they decide to. Second, that an apology spoken under pressure rarely holds. Still, I recognized something real in her voice, something that sounded like the beginnings of shame. Claudia, I said cautiously, I will listen. She came to my apartment 2 days later. She did not bring gifts. She did not wear jewelry that spoke loudly. She looked diminished but present. Lucinda, she said when she sat, I feel foolish. I acted like I always have. But seeing you that night,
I kept thinking about the things I missed as a child. My mother not being there, my father's gambling, the one meal we couldn't afford. I thought I fixed it with money, but money didn't fix the hole. It filled it with more noise. Her words were raw, and in them was a tiny thread of truth. I didn't feel triumphant listening to her. This was not a game to win. This was the heavy work of people trying to recover themselves. "Are you saying you want to change?" I asked. She looked down. I, I don't know how. I'm afraid. My husband is angry when I'm weak. He thinks softness is a liability. Strength comes in many forms, I told her. It's not only in a firm hand. It can be in saying, "I was wrong." It can be in the daily work of listening. She sighed. "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought of the long path she had to walk. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It is a map that must be traced step by step. "I will forgive you if I see change," I said. "If I see you asking yourself questions every day. If I see you intervene when your family measures people by what they have, then I will forgive. Meanwhile, I'll be polite but distant." She nodded, tears glistening. "I can try." That attempt at vulnerability did not immediately transform Roberto. His machinations were slower, his pride thicker. He sent a lawyer-like message about reputational harm, bizarre and angry and slightly unhinged. It read like a man trying to gain ground by threatening an image he thought he owned. Aaron responded with firm, adult clarity. We would not tolerate intimidation. Our family would choose dignity over forced alliances. The Tauruses retreated into a defensive posture. Some relatives took sides. Others watched, waiting for who would break first. But the real change began quietly. Mila started making small choices differently. She donated to a neighborhood shelter anonymously. She started a conversation with a friend from college about why it felt empty when people were paid for their silence. She returned an expensive piece of jewelry to a boutique, not because it was too flashy, but because she realized buying things to impress made her feel hollow. These were small acts. They were not headlines. But I watched them like a gardener watches seedlings. Persistence and care would determine what grew. One afternoon, Aaron surprised me by bringing a folder. "What's that?" I asked. "Documentation for a small trust," he said. "For you. Not charity. An account we set up to help with anything you might need. We discussed it as a symbol of respect. Money with intention, not performance." My eyes filled with tears then. Not for the money, which I didn't need, but for the intent. The gesture meant he had seen the difference between offering money to silence and offering resources with transparency and love. It was the difference between buying distance and building safety. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. He smiled sheepishly. "You taught me." And in that moment, the real inheritance I'd wanted to pass on, values, not wealth, felt present in a small, real way. Seasons shifted. Autumn painted the city in ochre and rust. There were dinner invitations that came with uneasy apologies, tokens that sometimes were genuine and sometimes not. I accepted a few, declined others. People asked whether I regretted the dinner. There are many ways to regret choices, the ones made out of cowardice and the ones that wound others but reveal a truth. I felt no regret. The night had been a messy, necessary lesson. A year later, at a small family gathering for a mutual friend's birthday, I saw Claudia across the room. She had changed in small, human ways. She moved with less pretense and more reserve. She spoke less about purchases and more about a new hobby, volunteering at a clinic. I did not declare victory. I watched. Sometimes change will quietly be a better person. Mila and Aaron are still together. They are flawed in the good way, working at compromise, holding each other accountable, sometimes failing, often learning. They invited me to holiday dinners. I attended when it felt right and declined when it didn't. Boundaries, I had learned, are the architecture of healthy relationships. The lessons I wanted to leave you with, as a narrator and as someone who has lived in both worlds, are not triumphant platitudes. They are simple, stubborn truths. Wealth can be used to hide insecurity or to free people. The difference is intention. Use money to create safety and opportunity, not to prop ego. Humility is not poverty. Choosing a modest life can be an act of taste and of principles. It can be a refusal to be defined by objects. Dignity is priceless. Nobody should have to barter their dignity for acceptance. Boundaries are love. Protect your peace by setting limits, both with those who use money to control and with those who cannot yet see their own hurt. Forgiveness is conditional but possible. It is earned through change, not demanded as a free pardon. When I look back at the night in the Sapphire Elm, I don't see revenge. I see a clarifying moment, a test, a lesson taught in public, because that's sometimes how lessons stick. I kept living simply, my apartment, my old kettle, my walks in the park. I accepted both identities without shame. Money was a tool, not a crown. One evening, as I walked through the park, an elderly woman fed pigeons and smiled at me. She reminded me of the woman I had spoken to the night after the dinner, the one who had said, "The richest people often die without having lived." I sat with her on a bench. We exchanged small truths about life that no bank can buy. "You did right," she told me plainly, looking into my eyes. "Did I hurt them?" I asked. "Truth hurts," she said, "but sometimes truth is the only thing that heals." I sipped my tea after that conversation and thought of all the people who measure others by their shoes and sizes. I hoped they find their way out of fear. I hoped they learn to measure by heart. And as for me, I slept well that night, because when you stand for what you believe, even if it costs others their illusions, you rest easier. You do not carry the weight of performances. You carry only the quiet dignity of a life aligned. When the camera of your mind stops rolling and the real everyday begins again, remember this: the most powerful acts are often the quiet ones. Speaking truth softly but firmly, holding boundaries, teaching by example, and loving without seeking to be applauded.